Well, thanks for joining this podcast. I've obviously heard about Jasper from a lot of our common customers. It looks like you all have done a lot of great things over the last year or so, moving away from, I would say, moving a lot more aggressively into enterprises and B2B companies. So thanks for joining the podcast.
Sure. Yeah. Excited to be talking to you. Thanks, Kishore.
Absolutely. And then one, obviously a lot of folks know about Jasper, but would love to hear a quick introduction about what Jasper does from your point of view and why marketers should be excited about it.
Yeah. Happy to answer that. Yeah. So essentially, in a nutshell, Jasper is AI built for marketing. So we're a purpose-built AI platform that sits on top of the general purpose LLM. So we're LLM optimized, which means we plug into a variety of different LLMs and we sort of curate your results and your outputs based on what we think is going to get you the best marketing results. So we have a proprietary layer that sits on top of the general purpose LLM called our Jasper IQ layer, which is basically trained to understand deep marketing context. So it understands if you're writing a blog post, it will make sure that it's optimized for SEO. If you're writing an email, it'll make sure that the headline is optimized for open rates. It understands your audiences, your brand voice and tone. And so it can create really contextually relevant content for you. And so that's kind of at a base level that's different from a general purpose LLM or something you would get from kind of a generic AI tool, which we've, as you mentioned, as we moved into the enterprise space, it's something that marketers really care about. And then there's kind of the no-code tooling inside the interface that allows marketers to be able to easily adopt and scale AI across their organizations. So that's the gist.
Very helpful, Loreal. And I think as you sort of mentioned that overview, the one topic that I've been thinking about a lot is how the content supply chain is sort of evolving and changing as Gen AI has come through in place. Want to understand your point of view on how it is changing, but also how is the marketing team structure changing as well, and what new skill sets do people need to adopt to that? Would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, content is really interesting because content was perhaps one of the first applications of generative AI.
Yeah.
And so it seems very easy and straightforward, but actually, like you mentioned, content is this whole can of worms because
Right.
it's not just a matter of creating a single piece of content, a blog post or an email. It's actually much bigger than that when you think about that, the fact that marketing runs on content. I remember this funny story about, I wasn't at Jasper in the early days, but the company launched in 2021. And someone who was here back then said that in the early days of Jasper, you would demo Jasper writing a headline for you, and people's minds were blown because they'd never seen anything like that,
Right.
And this, of course, like 9 or 10 months prior to ChatGPT going GA. And so it seems straightforward, the idea that like AI can create a piece of content for you. But what we've realized as we really dig in and work with these enterprise marketing teams and partner with these teams is something that kind of came out earlier this year in a research report that we produced called like the State of AI in Marketing. We interviewed and surveyed a bunch of marketers and CMOs. And what we found is that the majority of marketers are using AI today, and they're using it for, in a lot of cases, content creation. But most of the use cases, in fact, more than half, are focused on ad hoc individual content creation. And what really kind of allows marketers to reach that inflection point, we call it the AI inflection point, the point at which AI starts to meaningfully transform your business outcomes, is the idea of not just creating an ad hoc or an individual piece of content, but being able to create content at scale. And there are many barriers that prevent marketers from doing that. So back to your question of the content supply chain, that's where I think AI has a lot of potential, is as marketers reach this inflection point where they can not just create a single piece of content, but they can scale what we call at Jasper internally, our product team calls this a content factory.
I see.
So how do you create a content factory where you can not just create one piece of content, but you can automate an entire workflow because you're able to produce content at scale. And by scale, I mean like in the thousands, and you can ensure that the content that's created is good quality, it's on brand, it understands your audience, so it dials up the right messages according to, if you're talking to a Gen Z audience, or you're talking to a boomer audience or tech enthusiasts, it knows what messages to include. And so you can really scale that content across different formats, across different languages, regions. And that's what I feel like it has changed with respect to AI entering the scene. And it hasn't really been widely adopted yet in that manner, to really automate the content supply chain. So I still think there's a lot of potential as marketers start to get this in place and get this right, is to really like transform the entire content life cycle using AI rather than just using it, in a more ad hoc capacity.
On that point, I like the term you used about content factory or producing multiple content pieces at scale, compared to just producing a single piece of blog post, right, for something. Uh, just to make it real, like, can you share an example of a use case that you would have seen a customer use in their workflows that was transformative for this particular sort of use case?
Yeah, I have a few examples. The one that's probably the easiest and that we see customers adopting the most is well, thinking through. I'll talk a couple of examples. One is like a campaign, a product launch. If you have a new product that's launching globally, and you are an enterprise team that's global and has different
Right.
regions that you need to where you need to launch the product, and so you create like a whole bill of materials to launch that product. So it's not just about like I'm going to
Yeah.
create a blog post. And I'm going to create. So it starts with the whole process end to end, where you'll use AI, and so usually it's not just that a human was in the loop; it's that a human was along for every step of the process. And now a lot of this can be automated with AI, where you automate away some of these tasks. So starting from start to finish with like the launch of a campaign or of a product, AI can help you create the brief. So you can feed it maybe like a product document or something from your R&D
Mm.
team. And you can feed it maybe like persona, or it can help you kind of create like the persona doc. Then it can, contextually understand who the audience is for this product. It can help you create the brief on what your business goals are. And then from the brief, it can then recommend a series of assets. So here's a bunch of emails for you to promote this new product. Here's a press release. Here are, some ads that we think you should create. And so the AI can generate not just a single asset, but the full workflow of creating that whole bill of materials. And then once you have that bill of materials, you can then say, okay, now make this for the EMEA region, or make this for Sydney, in Sydney. And so just spinning that up and being able to translate that all and doing, you could say in a single product launch campaign, you might need to create 1,000 assets. And AI can easily automate kind of that end-to-end workflow for you.
That's a great
If you,
example.
architect that way. Yeah.
And for the point you mentioned about customizing these campaign assets for even geography specific, right? Like one for EMEA, one for Australia, right? Is it fundamentally different because the different geographies need different kinds of assets culturally, L'Oreal, or is it what's the difference between the geographical nuances here?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a couple different things. There's one, there could be different assets. It might be that, in EMEA, because of GDPR, you don't want to do as many, you can't do as many emails, or you can't really
Right.
get people to a webinar as easily. And so you might want to do a blog post instead or something like that. So it can be a different type of asset, but then obviously also the language, and not even just the language, but just the localization to make sure that it's in
Right.
the right vernacular, and it's really appealing to those audiences. It might be that there's an enterprise audience in the US, but there might be more of a developer audience, or, so you can also make the content relevant to the different audiences in the different regions.
That's very helpful. I love hearing about this because these are people obviously talk about things at a high level sometimes, and defining the actual use cases and how people are actually using that in the work makes it a lot more real. And the example you gave was very solid. And I think the other example I remember we were prepping for this, you were talking about like an e-commerce company that can automatically sort of create
Yes.
product descriptions at scale, right? Can you talk about that? Well, I'd love to hear that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have a couple of great retail customers, and it's actually a very popular segment for us because if you can imagine, a retail customer has so many different products that they need
Right.
to create e-commerce pages for on their website. So, Wayfair is a great example of one of our customers. Ulta Beauty is another customer, Adidas. And so with these products, like if you think about Adidas as a company that has multiple e-commerce pages that they need to create, and they need to have product descriptions attached to each of their SKUs. If they have different audiences that they're going after, so let's say in the case of Adidas, they might have fashion enthusiasts, and they also might have diehard athletic fans, like athletes.
Right.
And the way that you write a product description for each of those audience is very different, because you focus on different value propositions, different features of the product. And so being able to scale content, and this is going back to what I was saying about the kind of the factory, it's not just a matter of scaling the content in a very generic way that makes it faster to create. You also want to create content that's very resonant for
Right.
the particular audience, that really drives them to engage with the brand, drives loyalty. And so that's where using AI to kind of automate that and really scale out those product description pages at scale. Wayfair is another example, has implemented this workflow with Jasper, where they're creating, thousands of product descriptions. And with that, they're able to ship 50 more SKUs per week, because they're able to automate this process. And so again, that's a way that they kind of tie it back to business value.
Incredible example though. I think to your earlier point, the first use case for AI was content creation, right? And in particular, text became like the most sort of prominent use case. But slowly, it feels like there are a lot of applications in both image, video, and it's getting a lot more multimodal from a use case standpoint. Loreal, what is sort of your thought on that? Are you seeing customers leveraging tools for image, video, because it's going to become multidimensional quickly, and it's not going to be just text, right?
Yeah, I've seen some really cool applications of image and video. Our own creative team uses some cool tools too. I know they use Midjourney for image creation. I know there's a lot of good stuff. The Figma conference was just a couple weeks ago, and they have some good, exciting new AI capabilities that our creative team is really excited about. One thing that we're seeing that's kind of specific to the marketing use case actually plays into a little bit of the retail example that I was just talking about with product pages, where we see customers big retail customers that also want consistency across the product catalog, not just of the product description, but also the image itself. And so you want it to have maybe a consistent background, and you want to make sure that it's well lit and that it's the highest quality. And so it's a very manual and laborious process to have to go through every single image and make sure that you're editing it in Photoshop and that it's just perfect. And so using AI to automate that at scale is a use case that we've seen. And then similarly, when it comes to sort of personalization and really resonating, another thing that you can do is again, to use Adidas as an example, let's say you're showing a sneaker in an ad, and it's a banner ad with a picture of the product in it. If you want to make it contextually relevant to you or I, because I know we're both in the Bay Area, you might show it with a background in San Francisco or a park near where you run or something so the background can change very dynamically, and that's something that AI can apply based on a prospect's location.
It's a great example. And the other thing, apart from the use cases, is fantastic. A lot of marketing leaders I'm speaking to lately are also thinking a lot about brand marketing very closely, right? I think the last decade was extremely focused on performance marketing, probably, and it seems like the pendulum is actually swinging a little bit towards brand marketing, right? Is that what you're hearing from your customers? Is that how you approach marketing at Jasper? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that piece a little bit.
It is, yeah. It's something that I'm I feel actually quite strongly about with AI, and you could think the opposite with AI, that there's going to be more focus on sort of technology and automation, but actually what we're seeing is that like you said, the pendulum is swinging because AI is leveling the playing field a little bit. AI is making it so that performance marketing, which to your point, the last decade has been very focused on improving clicks, improving conversions, improving CAC, and all the acronyms, ROI, CAC, all these things. And as AI does sort of level the playing field on some of those things, with the brands that can really stand out and differentiate are going to be the ones that are focused on authenticity, on really driving that connection, standing out in a very crowded market.
Right.
And the example that I always use is, I talk about, I don't know if you ever watched the show Mad Men or are familiar with that, back in the 50s, the 60s of the big ad agencies, it used to be that marketing was the reason that brands won or lost. Like you would win or lose based on the quality of your campaign. This, Volkswagen and
Yes.
Coca-Cola, like you have a
Marlboro,
great ad.
like, right, right.
Exactly,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And then we moved away from that, and we've sort of entered this era, like you said, the last decade, where now CMOs are the shortest tenured member of the executive team, because there's such a focus on performance and
yeah.
revenue marketing. And I do think that we're starting to see that flip where performance is becoming a commodity. There's so many tools available out there to help drive this. And so as that frees up the humans, the actual marketers themselves, it allows them to focus more on creativity and on building those brands that can stand out.
You're right. I mean, at least, I've seen days when people obsess over some copy in an ad, right? Because of the fact that, to your point, that's what makes or breaks the ad a little bit. I think slowly it was starting to die down a little bit, but it seems like it is back where creativity holds a premium compared to just like operationalizing things, at least from a marketing standpoint. So that's great to hear. I think the other sort of sub bullet point to this whole brand marketing is this term that you used in our prep call called, I think it's called relationship capital, right?
Relationship,
Yeah.
right?
Can you define that piece a little bit more and sort of how you think about that when you do marketing for Jasper?
Yeah, one thing we talk a lot about is that, and as we've been talking about this conversation, AI can profoundly transform how marketing gets done.
Mm.
So it can augment, our craft, it can enhance our craft, but at the end of the day, our core job as marketers is to build authentic connections with our
Right.
customers, and that is something that will always require humans.
Right.
And so when you think about relationship capital, that's what we're referring to is how do you automate away a lot of the repetitive tasks? There's a stat that I think came from a HubSpot study that 1/3 of a marketer's time is spent on repetitive tasks. And so if you are able to automate that away and free yourself up to build truly meaningful relationships with customers, and that's why we don't see, like, we are not, even at Jasper, we do a lot of field marketing, a lot of events, in-person events. We have a customer advisory board. We connect with our customers quarterly in person and build those relationships. And, I think I posted about this on LinkedIn, but in February, we took our cab to Park City and we did like a snowmobiling excursion. And we were like racing each other on snowmobiles and seeing who could go the fastest. And that's not something you can do with AI. You can't like get out there and snowmobile with your
Yeah.
customers and have fun and then go, have drinks afterwards at the bar
Yeah.
and hang together. So
Exactly.
it's like that's what I mean by relationship capital, is building those relationships is, and I think, a critical part of marketing and something that cannot be replaced with a machine.
That's a great example, and also to your point, especially even enterprises prefer to sort of buy that way because there's just so many vendors in a category that they want to build trust before they actually pick someone as a vendor of choice, and that, I'm sure it plays a huge difference in a company's brand and perception, especially when talking enterprises. So. But that sounds fun though. The snowmobile activity that you guys did,
Yes.
that
Yeah,
fun.
I mean, we're seeing that too. I mean, not just in marketing, but what you mentioned on, the buying cycle and the role of sales too is changing in this new world because
Yeah.
again, AI can automate a lot of the sales process. It can help do your outbound outreach for you, help you figure out what accounts to focus on and things like that. But at the end of the day, especially when it comes to buying AI, customers are looking for a strategic partner, not just a
Right.
vendor. They need the roadmap and the playbook. And that's where, as a go-to-market team more broadly across marketing and sales and customer success, we have to be the ones guiding customers towards, what is your goal? How do you get there? And it's more than just buying the technology licenses.
Right. Right. On the point about playbooks, L'Oreal, I think one thing that I'm sure you would have observed here is that a lot of times these workflows are new to people who adopt these technologies, and they're looking for guidance from tech partners to understand how do I get to that outcome, right? It's not just like a couple of calls to give them some training. It needs like being deeply embedded in their team to make them successful if they buy your technology. Would love to understand your thoughts on like how has post sales been at Jasper? Like what have you guys learned in terms of how to make customers successful right? How does the onboarding training work? All that stuff would be great to hear.
Yeah. No, that's a really hot one for us. So basically, one of the things that we recommend and that we coach customers on is to make sure that they have a strategy in place, because
Mhm.
what we've seen is that a lot of times, particularly in marketing, there's almost like a rush to adopt AI. People want to just get it as soon as they can and get their hands on it because they feel behind the curve already. Like I needed it yesterday. My
Right.
board is asking me, my CEO is asking me what am I doing with AI? So I just need it fast without having thought through a strategy of, what the goals should be. And so that's one thing that you kind of just alluded to is we recommend that you start with the business outcomes that you're trying to drive, and then you figure out how to embed AI into that. It shouldn't be a separate thing that you're asking people to learn. It's distracting. It won't drive meaningful business impact. So how do you integrate it into your existing processes and kind of like KPIs and goals? So that's kind of one thing that is helpful to kind of reframe. The other thing is culturally, especially with marketing teams, because we've kind of talked in this conversation about a lot of marketers are they're strategic, they're creative, and there is this very real fear about AI and about job displacement and job replacement. And and we believe, and kind of what I've talked about in this conversation is that humans are really at the center of
Right.
this AI revolution. AI is designed to enhance and to augment what the humans are really driving, at their core. But that's not well understood, I think, out of the gate. And a lot of, particularly we see this in like creative teams that are very resistant to adopting it. And
Mm.
so I think there's also sort of like a leadership framing that is needed, that needs
Yes.
to come from leaders within an organization to tell their teams that, this is to help you. This is to augment your work. It's to help scale your great, awesome work, but we need you to be the ones driving it, or it won't work. It'll fail. And that's an important
Yeah.
piece to get right, because
Yeah.
without that, you just give them the tools, and they're like, I don't want to use it. They
Right.
don't feel, like they have skin in the game, or like, a real incentive to go and use it, because they're like, why would I go use it if it's just going to put me out of a job in a year? And so
Yes.
I think getting that message right internally is actually a critical part of the adoption journey.
That's a great point.
Um,
Yeah, because I remember this thing where we were recently selling to a large services company, right? The creative team was involved in the buying journey, and everyone is excited except the creative team because they felt like, you know what, this could potentially replace me, and they said like I'm gonna eventually like block this in some capacity because of the fear of some sorts, right? And the only way we could think of is that hey, if there is top-down mandate from the team that hey, look, not going to replace you. It's going to help you and make sure that you don't have to spend X dollars on like I don't know agency or something like that to keep it all centralized. So it needs a lot of top-down love for the team that hey, you know what, it's not going to like change your work in any phase. It's going to improve your efficiency. That helps a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah, totally. And I think, yeah, showing them how it can help them rather than replace them. And also, another analogy that I've heard is it's a lot like Photoshop for photographers. Like
Mm.
Photoshop did not replace the need for world-class
That's a great
photographers,
analogy.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Tool in their tool belt. It's something that they all use now as part of their process, part of their workflow for editing. And so I think that's kind of an analogy. It's like AI will not, for creatives or for marketers, it's a tool that you will use at your disposal as opposed to something that's going to replace like something that only you can do.
right. I'm just mentally thinking it's a great analogy actually. I'm going to steal that analogy from you. Like the Photoshop example, it just really puts that in people's mind. It's a good analogy actually. So awesome. And one question I usually typically ask to all folks I interview, L'Oreal, obviously you've sort of raised up the marketing career to become the CMO of a very fast growing company. Any learnings you can share to potentially middle management marketers who want to become CMO someday? What should they think about, especially in this fast changing world? How can they prepare themselves a little bit? Would love to hear your thoughts on what, they
Yeah, I think, one thing that I have realized, especially taking this role at Jasper, which is different about an AI company, but I think actually a practice that I would recommend because the market is just changing so drastically in general with tools like AI, at our disposal, is that the market's changing, and don't assume that you have the playbook. Like, come in with kind of a fresh perspective. And again, it kind of hits on a lot of the themes that we've been talking about here, which is think critically about the problems that you're trying to solve. Because, for example, like I had, experience from other companies coming in and thought I knew, like, I've been, I was at Stripe for a couple years before this, and I had been at Salesforce for 6 years before that. So I've learned all these great things, and not that that doesn't come in handy. Of course it does. But when you come into a company like Jasper and there's a different market and marketing is changing, you can't just rely on your same old playbooks.
Right.
You have to take that and apply it in a different way in this market that is totally different. And something that, I've thought a lot about is that with, in order for technology to be successful and for you to be successful as a leader, you need to not just think about how to, incrementally change existing processes. Right. You need to almost think about how to re-architect processes with this new technology from the ground up. Like, if you take something that you think you've known how to do, like for years, I started out my career early in content marketing. And so, my process for writing a blog post would be, like understand your audience, do research, brainstorm some themes, start to write. And now it might be like, I go into Jasper and ask Jasper some questions to ideate, right. Like the total way, the way that we do our jobs has changed. And so I think with leadership as well, in middle management, it's, not relying on all of the playbooks that you've had for how to do business, how to grow a business, how to do marketing, but also adding your own fresh perspective and thinking about, how to think critically and problem solve in a world where there is no playbook for a lot of the things that we're being asked to do today.
Very, very helpful. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming and spending time with us, especially the part where you shared about the use cases and how you're envisioning the content teams to evolve was extremely eye-opening, and I'm sure the folks listening to this will find it helpful. But thank you so much for doing this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kishore.